Hi, I'm Mary Kopczynski, the CEO of Regulator. Here's your update on this week's 15,137 regulatory alerts. Numbers are going down just as we hoped. We at Regulator are about to go into prod parallel of our back-end engine called Merlin, which is spelled MRLN for Massive Regulatory and Legislative Nexus. This is where the AI machine learning rails are going to get started, which is really exciting. But we have to do it the old way and the new way at the same time while we test it, and then eventually we will turn off the old way. And that's when, my friends, we will be able to go from 6,000 regulators to 25,000 regulators overnight. So the regulators of the week are tied, this time between Texas and Tennessee. I'm going to start with Tennessee because, kind of like Montana the other week, they have some thoughts about the world. No judgment. I am just presenting the facts. 1. Tennessee has made it illegal for any school to require any employee or faculty member to participate in implicit bias training. 2. Tennessee has specified that a teacher or employee of a school is not required to refer to a student using the student's preferred pronoun if the pronoun is not consistent with the student's biological sex. It also will insulate the teachers from any civil liability or adverse employment in doing that. 3. Tennessee has legally defined sex for the purposes of statutory construction. Okay, so again, just facts. Every Tennessee law that passes as a part of the promulgation process has what is called a fiscal note, where someone reviews the law in relation to how much it will cost the state or save the state. Basically, the financial impacts of the rule. I eyeballed the fiscal notes on these 3 laws. The implicit bias training will actually cost the state over $90,000 because 28 out of the 44 educator preparation programs in the state include implicit bias training. So they will need to hire 3 consultants to revise those training programs. The student pronoun one is going to impact the Department of Education. In order to get federal funding, the state Department of Education needs to comply with federal laws that do allow for an alternative definition of sex. Tennessee currently gets $1.2 billion in U.S. Department of Education grants. And the last one, the gender one, is going to impact the Department of Education and the Department of Health. Well, we already know Tennessee gets $1.2 billion in U.S. Department of Education grants, but they also get $750 million from the U.S. Department of Health. And because an increase in state litigation may go up over these issues, the committee can't settle on a final cost to the state. And now I will add some personal color. Look, previous to the pandemic, the 50 states were dormant. They just took the federal money and shut up. And it went on for over 60 years. But this pandemic, to have the opposite of federal oversight and leadership, the states largely had to fend for themselves. We had cases of Idaho striking deals directly with Taiwan to import and buy masks. It was an unprecedented time. But now that they're all awake and realizing their power, they're going nuts. But what's going to be really interesting is to see what happens when some of this federal funding dries up. Will they still be singing the same tune? Or are they going to slowly but surely comply and quiet down and take the money? I don't know, but it is super interesting. Moving along to Texas. Texas, which typically is quite red, if you will, signed a bunch of, let's say, bluish rules that some may say were nuanced and reasonable. And upon discovering my own personal bias the other week, I was just amazed by the progressive legislative moves. For one, it's now a criminal offense to own an animal if you've been previously convicted of animal cruelty. I was impressed there was even a law defining animal cruelty in Texas. They also strengthened a gun control law that makes it illegal to have a gun at a post-secondary school, which enhances an already existing rule that you're not allowed to have guns at schools. I was also surprised by this. They also increased the criminal penalty for assault of hospital personnel. So see, you can't do whatever you want in Texas. Furthermore, they are imposing a fee on certain sexually oriented businesses, a tax, if you will, that goes towards funding sexual assault programs. I didn't even realize sexually oriented businesses were really allowed in Texas. Another law asked for updated water studies of certain river basins. And apparently Texas has been monitoring water changes in the state since the 90s out of concern for drying rivers. So all of those were surprising. But then they put out a really intense study from the Texas Comptroller's Office where they're keeping an eye on ESG trends and the threat to oil and gas companies that operate and employ a lot of people in Texas. This study was really amazing. It reverse engineered information to come up with a list of about 10 major financial institutions, including obviously BlackRock, but also HSBC, Credit Suisse, UBS, BNP Paribas. Basically, that these institutions are refusing to invest in anything in oil and gas. So now they're looking at ways to fight back by either taxing these organizations, blacklisting them from the state, and all sorts of countermeasures to protect Texas's sustainability in the oil and gas economy. And finally, Texas passed a law clarifying that in the absence of federal law stating otherwise, it is the exclusive jurisdiction of the state of Texas to regulate greenhouse gas emissions in the state, and not any of the counties or towns. The topic of the week is Gen Z investing. The FINRA Investor Education Foundation and the CFA Institute have released a new report that examines attitudes and behaviors of 18 to 25-year-olds in the United States. Key findings include that despite their young age, a surprisingly large percentage of Gen Zs invest, 56%, and they primarily invest in cryptocurrency before normal individual stocks, and they are much less likely to have mutual funds. And perhaps not surprising, they learn about investing mostly through social media, with their top online resource being YouTube. And so that's it this week for Regulalytics. Join me every Wednesday on LinkedIn and in YouTube for your dose of regulatory news.